We want to give you a briefing on multiple incidents that occurred over this past weekend. As has been well reported, APD responded to multiple shooting incidents over the weekend, and today we're going to give you a briefing on 6 of those specific incidents. I'll provide a synopsis of those incidents, and then we will open it up for questions. However, since these are still active and ongoing investigations, there will not be a lot of additional information we'll be able to put out at that time. With me up here today, I have Detectives Munchnikov, Hayes, and Mabe, who have all been working over the weekend on different cases that we will discuss. The first incident that we will go over are the incidents that occurred on Villita Avenida. This appears to be an ongoing dispute between known subjects that led to 2 incidents over this past weekend. The first incident occurred on Wednesday, January 8th, at approximately 9:46 p.m. In this instance, officers responded to the 6900 block of Villita Avenida for a shots fired call and a report of a drive-by shooting as a residence. Officers arrived and found shell casings in the street, and they found a residence with numerous bullet holes in it, but there were no injured parties at that time. Approximately 15 minutes later, 911 received a call from an emergency room clinic for a juvenile male subject who presented with a gunshot wound. Officers responded to that hospital, and the juvenile male had sustained serious but not life-threatening injuries. Following that, on Friday, January 10th, the APD responded again to a second drive-by shooting in the 6900 block of Villita Avenida. Upon arrival, officers located multiple individuals outside the residence, but there was no report of injuries this time. Witnesses reported hearing between 20 and 30 gunshots and described the suspect vehicle as a silver or gray vehicle that was occupied between 3 and 5 times. Through the investigation that took place over the weekend into this incident, we have already made 1 arrest, and the investigation continues on that incident. We also had the second homicide of the year occur over the weekend. At 9:40 a.m. on Saturday, January 11th, APD received multiple 911 calls of a shooting that took place in the 1100 block of Rhineley Street in an apartment complex parking lot. Upon arrival, officers found a subject with multiple gunshot wounds. Fire and EMS arrived, and life-saving measures were attempted. However, they were unsuccessful, and the victim was pronounced deceased. The subject related to this shooting was taken into custody a short while later. APD officers arrived on scene, located the suspect, and were able to track him down and take him into custody. Currently, that subject is in jail and charged with unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. And again, the remainder of that case is still under investigation, and additional charges will be filed as appropriate as that investigation proceeds. This does appear to be an isolated incident, and we do not believe there is any threat to the community as a result of this incident. The third incident I will talk about is an aggravated assault that took place when APD received multiple calls of shots fired. This was a moving vehicle disturbance that took place in the area around Hickok Court, and this was on Friday, January 10th, and then again Saturday, January 11th, very early morning hours at 12:03 a.m. we got a call to Dell Children's Medical Center on 4900 Mueller. When the officers arrived, the security guard let them know that 2 Hispanic males had arrived at the hospital and carried in another Hispanic male to the emergency room suffering from a traumatic wound. The 2 Hispanic males left the scene without giving any information as to what had happened. That victim remains in critical condition at the hospital, and because of the seriousness of his injuries, the APD homicide unit is the lead investigative unit on that case. There were many subjects involved, and we have identified some of those subjects already. Again, that is still an ongoing investigation. We know as a result of that rolling gun disturbance between two vehicles that we have identified at least 5 homes that were struck by gunfire during that disturbance. It's important to note that the detectives are asking anyone in the community that has information, whether it be information on who was involved, videos, pictures, anything that you may have, to please call Crime Stoppers at 512-472-TIPS or text TIP 103 plus your message to CRIMES, C-R-I-M-E-S, or use our new Crime Stoppers app, or email APD Homicide at homicide.apd@austintexas.gov. And it's important to note that you may remain anonymous. If you have information, please call us, let us know what you know, and if necessary, you can do so anonymously. There was another aggravated assault that occurred in the 1100 block of Airport Boulevard on Saturday, January 10th at 11:36 p.m. In this instance, a female resident responded to a knock at her front door, and as she was at the front door, she was shot multiple times. At this time, we do not know if the female knows the suspect in this case or if they were strangers. She was transported to a local hospital with serious but not life-threatening injuries. And again, the only thing we know on this case at this time is that the suspect was a male. We have no other description. Again, as I stated before, detectives need assistance with this case, and anyone who has information, again, who saw something, heard something, has video, or has information, please again reach out to us at the numbers that I already gave, and that will provide you again at the close. A 5th incident occurred on Saturday, January 11th. This was a shooting that occurred in the 1600 block of East Palmer Lane in a parking lot. It occurred at 6:52 p.m. This case, there were 2 individuals involved in a disturbance that were shooting at each other, and as a result of that, one of the subjects was shot and presented themselves at a local hospital. That case is still under investigation, and we do not have additional information at this time to put out on that case. And finally, we had an incident that occurred on January 10th at 6:48 p.m. in the 11,400 block of North IH-35, an apartment complex where a tow truck operator was attempting to remove a vehicle from the property, and someone within the property began firing a weapon at the tow truck driver. Thankfully, he was not struck. Officers responded quickly and were able to take the suspect into custody and recover the firearm that was used. And that suspect at this time has been charged with aggravated assault. Our investigators and our officers worked very diligently over the weekend, a weekend that was very different from many here in Austin. On top of all the calls that I just highlighted, we had several shots fired calls as well, calls where people reported hearing gunfire. Now, that is not uncommon to have in any given weekend, and investigators are working to determine if any of those are related to the incidents that we just discussed. These are all occurring at a very difficult time for the police department. As of today, we have 180 vacancies in the police department. We will graduate a class January 31st and then begin another class in February. However, the proposed resolution that passed that could delay the June cadet class will further delay us catching up with our staffing needs. So this is something we have to pay very close attention to. We often say that a visible police presence is a strong deterrent to crime. So I'm grateful that the Texas Department of Public Safety has a stepped-up presence in Austin at this time, and we will look to partner with them on initiatives throughout the city so we can keep that police presence where it needs to be, and we can have a response posture that will allow us to respond as quickly as possible to future calls for service. We're also currently planning for the upcoming Spring Music Festival. We were already making plans based on what we saw last year with the increase in violence that we had not seen in years before, marked by a few shootings that took place as well. The events of this past weekend will feed into that planning as well as we work to put together a plan to keep everyone safe as they come to Austin and enjoy what is one of the crown jewels of our city, and that is our music festivals. It's important that as a community we remain vigilant. We need the community's support. We need everyone paying attention to what's going on and calling 911 if you see something suspicious. But I also believe there are some in this community who have information on the incidents that we have just described in this press conference. These shootings, this murder, these lives that have been forever changed. And it is important that you come forward. And again, you can do so anonymously if you feel the need to, but we need to clear these cases, we need to solve these crimes, and we need to hold people responsible. The actions that these suspects have taken, driving through the city, firing weapons at each other out of vehicles, not only endangered themselves, but they have endangered many. As we said, at least 5 homes were struck in one neighborhood where the one disturbance took place. And this puts all lives at risk, those that live in the neighborhoods and those pedestrians that may be there as well. So we need the community to come forward and help us with any information that you may have. Austin is still the 5th safest major city when it comes to violent crime, but we are seeing changes. We are seeing increases in violent crime. We are seeing increases in the use of firearms committed during commission of violent crimes. These are all things that we're paying attention to and things that we have got to, as a community, come together and work towards solving. So I'm going to open it up for questions here momentarily, but again with the reminder that each and every one of these cases that we have described is each still an open case and actively being investigated. So there's a lot of information that we cannot put out that might jeopardize the integrity of that investigation. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Chief, all these incidents happen so quickly in such a short period of time, and we're only 2 weeks into the new year. Does this set a concerning trend for 2020?
You know, we can talk about what the trend for 2020 is. We're 2 weeks in. Whether this was the first 2 weeks of 2020 or 2 weeks in the middle of any given year, I think what we're seeing here, we all have to pay attention to. As I said, we're still the 5th safest major city, but we are seeing increases in the use of firearms in Part 1 violent crimes, and what we've experienced over the past couple of weeks we cannot ignore. And again, all of this is occurring at a time when we are facing staffing challenges in the department, and that is something that we have to be aware of.
As we're talking about an increase in violent crime, when I'm explaining this to readers, what's the best way to explain to them? Like, is there an uptick this year compared to last year, this month compared to last month? Like, how do I just explain that to people?
Sure. We're still finalizing the crime numbers for 2019, and at the end of the day, we will likely be relatively flat in violent crime. We had realized some gains earlier in the year where violent crime was down, but we have seen that swing back in the other direction. So although the numbers are not finalized, I think we'll be relatively flat when it comes to violent crime in 2019. But again, as we've talked about, 2020 has got off to a very difficult start.
What is the department doing to make sure, this is not going to be, we're not going to be talking to you about 6 incidents every week like this?
Sure. The department is taking every step that we can. Patrol officers, again, are being very vigilant. As was pointed out in several of these cases, officers were there within minutes and suspects were taken into custody. So we're doing what we can, but to be proactive, this is where we are working in those areas where we know that crime is clustering. We're following up on all the leads on these cases to try and determine if any of the other calls that we had over the weekend were related to these specific incidents. And this, again, is where we need the community to come forward, either helping us solve the crimes that we've talked about today or just continuing to partner with us in reporting suspicious activity. Whether we're talking about the shootings of this weekend and the shots fired calls, or whether we're talking about just maintaining your own sense of safety in a difficult time in our society when we're seeing violent acts taking place, whether it be hate crimes or whether it be the concerns of international incidents that bring terrorism concerns to the forefront. It is a time when we all need to be working together. We all need to be vigilant. Thank you very much.
There you just heard from Austin Police Chief Brian Manley about 6 violent incidents that happened over the last 3 days, starting in Friday night and Saturday and Sunday as well. I'm going to go Away from the media briefing room for just a moment, we're going to recap, if you weren't listening and just joining us here on KXAN Live, what the police chief said a minute ago. Again, he detailed 6 incidents in particular throughout Austin where gun violence was involved in every one of these situations. In these separate incidents, at least 4 people have been shot, 1 person killed. He did say that several people have been taken into custody for these different crimes, but we don't know the exact number on that situation at the moment. He did also call this weekend a different weekend. He said it's not unusual to hear shots fired calls coming into police, but to have so many violent incidents where people are hurt, that is different for Austin. He did mention there is an increase in the amount of gun violence and violent incidents here in our city. He also said that this is also coming at a difficult time for the police department. He mentioned that there are 180 vacancies for Austin police, which obviously affects how many officers are out patrolling the streets, responding to calls, investigating different things. So he wanted to highlight that too, and talking about the different police academies that they were hoping to gain people, new officers from, but that has been put on pause for a moment while there's another investigation happening into the police department. Once again, you can read more about these incidents on our website, KXAN.com, and the KXAN News app. From what the sound of it was, I believe I heard our reporter, Eugen Cho, in the room there asking a couple of questions of Chief Manley. So she will be following up on this for our evening newscast coming up tonight at 4:30, here in just a few minutes, 5, 6, 9, and 10, so you can stay with us. Again, police are saying if anyone has information about these different situations, if you might have witnessed something or know something about it, give Crime Stoppers a call. You can remain anonymous. The police also shared the homicide detectives hotline, so if you have information on that, you can share it as well. Once again, thank you all for joining us here on KXAN Live. We hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we'll see you back here another time. Have a good one.